What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Late Round Fantasy Football Show presented by DraftKings. We have a fun show on tap for you today. It's the toughest players to rank. And so JJ, he's the ranker. So he's going to be giving his thoughts, and I'm just going to be asking a bunch of normie questions that I have. And basically it's going to be like, JJ, why are you doing this? Why isn't this guy high? Why aren't the Titans a little bit higher? So we'll be talking about that. We're getting down and nerdy with the Late Round Fantasy Football Show, sponsored by DraftKings. All right, welcome in, JJ. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. What if I was just really robotic the entire thing? Things are good. Like an NPR style. Things are really good today. I'm really excited for today's show.
We want to give a shout out to our sponsor, DraftKings, the best ball stuff. The draft one, get one. We are in the best ball streets. If you haven't already, today actually, we released another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. And you had Emo Cowboy, who is not the name might throw you off.
Yeah, it would throw you off. I actually, I didn't ask him, but I still have no idea what his last name is. I even searched for it. I did, but I didn't ask Tyler what his last name was because I assumed that he wanted to stay semi-anonymous without putting it out there.
Yes. So let's not dox our guest if they don't want it.
Yeah,
it's a good start.
I'm not going to push it.
Yeah. Okay.
I got doxed this week in our Discord chat.
You did.
I did. I got doxed.
Late round JJ back in. What, you were a freshman?
I think it was my junior year picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You keep talking. I'll take a screenshot and pull it up for people. Just not the name part, just the picture.
This is in the the everything else channel.
Yeah.
So for those that want to see, one of the members knew a guy who went to school with you, JJ.
That's right.
Yeah, and
that went to high school, not just not Pitt or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like we're talking like, oh, it's too little. You see how little that is? Try to insert it into the. Hang on, I'll do that again. But yeah, he apparently here, insert image oversells. That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
He apparently went to high school with me, and this is an early picture of me from high school. If you go over to the left.
Oh, it's to the left. Oh,
I just put it on top of everything.
Got it.
There it is. There it is. Yeah, someone posted that picture in our everything chat. This is
who
from
cut your hair?
Grade. Apparently, a blind barber is who cut my hair. I don't know what's going on there.
I know. I'm trying to figure out the style. Did you ever have any hairstyles back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, what
was the? Do you have the Ricky Martin? That was a little bit maybe before your time.
I had in middle school
frosted tips.
Yeah, I did frosted tips once, but the problem is the person who did it once did it with a cap where they pull your hair out and do it, and then it looked like I had a checkerboard on my head. I got made fun of from people all day that next day, and then I had to go back to the hairstylist and they had to dye it back brown. Yeah, that's where it was.
There you go. We did not say what the JJ stands for.
No, people.
If you're in that everything else channel, you'll
find out. I got doxed.
You'll find out at least what one of the
JJ look at this. JJ looking straight out of the American Pie cast. It's true. Just a very generic this doesn't help the argument of me being every white guy.
Yeah.
This picture from early high school. So
all right. Just a reminder to interact with us as we go on. This is an interactive show, so whether it's in real time or afterwards, I'm going to remove JJ there. Let us know your comments. And also a reminder, 13 days until the guide releases. We are
cooking.
Yes.
Cooking.
I'm basically seeing, I close my eyes right now and I see charts and tables.
Yeah.
And That's legit. So should be out July 1st, and it's good.
Thank you.
You know how cars, JJ, have like they go through different like design changes. Like you might have a certain model of a car that stays the same for like 3 or 4 years,
Sure.
and then they get like a body style change.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like this is a body style change.
You think this year's guide is a body
Yes.
style change? You mean in terms of both content and design, or just design?
No, content.
You think the content's a lot different than other ones?
Not a lot different, but there's just it's slightly different.
I agree. I tried. I wanted that to be the case. Like my goal is to not just regurgitate the same guide year in and year out. And so this year, I think that my mentality with it was much more about it being totally actionable for people. And I think the one section in particular on like VORP and how to like take rankings and ADP and use that all to your advantage and stuff, and like how to actually employ these strategies and look at things from, like actually use these lists that were just handed, is something that was new to this year's guide, and I think is going to be pretty helpful for people.
All right. You ready to get on to today's news? Week's news?
Let's do it. Let's see what's all about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. My guy, Manungai. We're going to lead off with this. If you're not in the NFL News and Rumors channel in the Discord, then you might not have seen that this is from Ben Devine at Chicago_NFL, who we're all familiar with, of course.
Yeah, look, no shade to Ben. I just, like he says on his Twitter account, like, I don't know what his credentials are, right? Like, his Twitter account says that he's a Bears reporter on X, and anyone could be that. So I have no idea how into the team he is.
Okay. He said, well, the Chicago Bears discussed adding another running back after seeing what they have in 7th round pick Kyle Manungai. That notion has been tabled. There's a real chance here for Manungai to eventually be the number 2 back and see meaningful carries as a rookie. #the Bears.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll say this. This is my reaction. Okay. We'll give Kevin Garnett a little shout out. I guess Jason Tatum too. That's my NBA knowledge, right? Because didn't Tatum do that also last year after they won? Yeah. Look, Kyle Manungai, in my opinion, from a Zap model perspective, from just a general day 3, round 7 hit rate perspective, Kyle Manungai is not likely to be a significant piece in fantasy football. Now, I said, I saw people in the Discord this week saying like, hey, are you still avoiding Manungai? And I'm like, I'm not really avoiding him because he's free. Like I took him in some rookie drafts. I've taken him in 20th round, DraftKings best ball drafts just because why not? Right. When there's not a significant cost associated to some of these players, I don't really care, like it just doesn't, it's not that big of a deal. And it is an ambiguous backfield. It is a relatively open backfield with, DeAndre Swift, who's had his struggles at times, and, Roshan Johnson, who we still don't know is good or not, right? Like we have no idea. And so strictly from that perspective, if there's opportunity in a good offense with a good coordinator, it would be silly to say fade Kyle Manungai. I'm merely saying that historically and based on the metrics that I work with, a player of his caliber and with his profile does not hit very frequently whatsoever, like at all. I mean, this is, to me, he's a worse prospect than what we saw out of like Kamani Vidal last year. And, he was an easy season-long dart throw because you could just drop him if, worst case scenario. And I feel similarly with Manungai, though. It's like, sure, if you want to take him in the last round of your draft, be my guest. But I don't think that you're going to get production from him right away in season long, from that perspective. And so he's going to be probably one of the first players that you cut. And then you'll be going after him on the waiver wire if something comes to fruition eventually. So, I'm fine if you want to go after him. It feels like it might sound like I'm hedging a little bit, but I'm just being honest. Like day 3 running backs, this is another thing, and this is a deeper conversation. But when I'm modeling this stuff, the day 1 and day 2 backs are what I'm actually modeling most for. When it comes to the day 3 guys, there are trends and things that we should be looking for. But a lot of the trends that I'm looking for in the Zap model are focused on day 1 and day 2 players because that is what is most meaningful by far. And so crazy things can happen on day 3 with a 7th round pick. If a 7th round pick hits in the first place, he's likely not going to be someone who, he's already kind of an outlier. And so
Yeah.
I'm okay with just saying that's kind of the case with Monangai.
It was big that we talked about it, that the Bears didn't draft a running back like we thought, like earlier.
Yeah.
Like we thought they would. And so, like you said, anything is possible. But
I do think Chicago, though, like might have wanted a running back. Like it's a possibility. They wanted Genty and then he got drafted right before them. They wanted Travion and he got drafted right before them. They wanted that Tootin Scadaboo tier. They got drafted right before them. So like there were these pockets in the draft where it's possible that they just kept getting sniped. But my argument would be there's no way that not no way, but it would be a pretty coincidental thing for like those specific running backs that they specifically wanted to get sniped the way that it kind of got laid out. I think that they are more okay with what they have than what people are, giving them credit for, which is why, we've been drafting Roschon all summer so far and best ball. And I think DeAndre Swift is a fine pick. I took him in the MFL 10 of death that we do every year, that Pat Foreman runs. I think Swift is someone, if you look at him the last time that he was playing with Ben Johnson, he saw a really strong target share and was an RB16 in PPR points per game and had like a 28% running back rush share. But that was in relation to Jamal Williams. It was that Jamal Williams season. Remember when Jamal Williams had like 18 touchdowns or whatever?
Yes.
So I think Swift is fine too. I think that you could throw darts at all of these players because I think the market is kind of like baking in what if they trade for someone or something like that.
Yeah. We all remember the touchdown dances for Jamal Williams. All right. Addising it all up. Jordan Addison's DUI trial is set for July 15th. He faces a potential suspension of at least 3 games. We thought that this might be put off until next season.
Yeah.
Now it's looking like the possibility of him facing suspension this season. Are your rankings accounting for this? Or does this make it tough to rank him?
It does make it tough to rank him. I haven't fully adjusted for this yet. Drew Davenport, who's a great follow on Twitter, great guy too. At Drew Davenport FF, he does a lot of legal type stuff, for fantasy football. He's the one who's been pretty on top of
Rashee Rice.
Rashee Rice and how Rice probably won't be suspended until 2026 because of the timing of him having to do the court thing. I don't know anything about the law. I mean, I have no idea what's going on there, but I trust Drew. He knows what's going on. So I haven't read fully what his take is with Jordan Addison, but it does sound like there's a chance that this suspension is like a 1 to 3 game suspension is what he is looking at here. So I think we got to bump him down a little bit, which is kind of nice because there's not much clarity in that range of drafts at wide receiver. And this at least like allows for a little bit of that.
People were, I think in the chat, someone said it's JJ and Hawkinson season now.
Yeah. So. I mean, Justin Jefferson should he's going to eat regardless, but it helps Hawkinson, who I'm not overly high on that second tier tight end. So that at least gives him a bump. I don't know when the suspension would hit. I'm assuming it would hit at the beginning of the season. Right. And so that would at least make him more attractive from a season long perspective, because you get that front end production and then you can kind of worry about things later.
Okay. The next one is just Debo's speed. Yeah. Reports out of camp said that coaches are impressed with Debo's speed. This is like that meme where it's the girl's taking a taste and she's like, That's kind of, we had the picture of like fat Debo. Now the coaches are impressed with his speed. I've heard some things about people saying this is the type of offense that Debo's going to thrive in. You've got possible contract disputes with F1. So where should we be on Debo?
I am having a hard, like he could have, hang on, I'm going to write this. He could have been featured on today's show.
Yeah.
Because I'm having a hard time with Debo. Yeah. Because on one side, you look at his peripherals last year, worst season of his career, like a 1.6 yards per out run, didn't have a great targets per out run rate, obviously had his worst season from a PPR points per game perspective. And I was initially going to have him on the players to avoid list in the draft guide. Like that was where my head was going. The more I dug into it, I actually dug into it last night because I was going to write it up. And I'm like, you know what? This is really difficult because the scheme and the situation, what is he saying here?
Debo's a chicken nugget away from being a tight end. No way his speed is impressing anybody.
Yeah. I mean, like my thing is the scheme really does fit Debo. Cliff Kingsbury as a coordinator will get horizontal pretty often. He'll run a lot of and throw a lot of wide receiver screens, and a low A dot role is in Debo Samuel's future. And it does kind of scare me a little bit about my Austin Eckler shares in best ball because I've got a lot of Austin Eckler. And so, I think Eckler is still going to be fine, but I do think that the scheme is good enough and favorable enough to kind of combat the red flags and concerns I have for Debo. I'm not really concerned about what he looks like in camp. I mean, we did the same thing with Keenan Allen last year, and he was relatively fine versus ADP. So I'm not going to go crazy, over his speed. I'd go more crazy over what he did last year, and that being concerning because he's not super young anymore.
Okay. Yeah. And it's easy right now for me, at least in the best ball streets, because we don't have to have it all figured out. Well, I don't before my draft. You kind of do because, like you said, you're writing players to target, players to avoid.
I'll remove guys if my opinions change. That's why we have the weekly updates and stuff.
But for right now, if you draft Jaden Daniels, or even if you draft like a Cowboy, and you're looking for like that week, so it's like he's in that range. Sure, he's a fine click, but if he's not someone that I'm going out of my way.
Yeah,
draft in best ball.
He's not a standalone piece for me right now, right? Like I'm getting him in stacks, and I'm fine about that. There's some players where I just don't even I'm not really that aggressive with them, even in stacks. But with this, fine with drafting Debo. I think he still has spike week potential still, too. So it's fine. And you can also, someone Jake mentioned this in chat, but you had the pneumonia stuff going on last year too. So we have to factor that in as well.
Sure. All right. Last one is the late round dart throw. Kind of more steam coming out of Giants camp with Jackson Dart. Looks like we're not going to get Jameis Winston. Dart's been taking all the reps with the twos, and just more glowing reports out of camp. And we kind of knew that, right? If you listen to, any of the pre-draft stuff with Jackson Dart, we knew that he was better than what people were thinking.
Yeah, Jim Sonis's model loved him.
Right.
Yeah.
Loved him.
Yeah.
I just liked him.
Yeah.
Loved
him and Cam Ward were both like top 10 over the last 10 years or something like that in the pre-draft model.
Right.
I think that there's some sneaky mobility with him. That's why I wrote that. And that's obviously what we want in fantasy. And look, usually these situations will side with the rookie eventually during their first season in the league. Like usually we'll see the rookie sooner than we think in these scenarios. And so, the Giants likely aren't going to be ultra competitive. I could see them moving on from Russ quickly and giving Jackson Dart some love. I think in best ball, he's someone that in a 3 quarterback build, if you have 2 pretty solid quarterbacks, you can go with him and just get that extra out in the playoffs if you are able to win your league and your pod. And so I'm cool with it. I thought that he was an undervalued, quarterback prospect, as you noted, and I'm not overly surprised that he's, impressing right now.
No one cares about our home leagues, but my home league is a Superflex keeper league, auction based. He will be a late round guy for me with all the potential he has for next year.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, let's get to today's data.
Yeah, this stems from the newsletter that I sent yesterday on a few coaching trends about running backs. The first one's the Greg Roman one. I still see tweets and commentary about Greg Roman being good in fantasy football for his running backs, and I just don't agree with it. I think that he has a good floor for his running backs if they're good, but I worry about the ceiling, and the ceiling stems from running back target share. This chart, this table, shows you his 10 completed years because he only had 1 year in Buffalo before he was fired, like in September the following year. And so these are the 10 seasons that he's had in the NFL as offensive coordinator. running back points is the rank that his running backs ranked in points scored, PPR points scored. Never has had a team that had a running back group ranked in the top 10 in points per game. I think this year might be tested a little bit because you get Najee and Amari and Hampton, but still, he's not had that throughout his career. And that's really driven by running back target share. If you average these numbers up, I mean, we can just do the math right here. But if you average this up, his running back target share rank, it's 26.3. So on average, his backfield's target share rank as a backfield has ranked 26th to 27th in the NFL since becoming an offensive coordinator, which is not great. And then you can just drag that over and see that his running back points on average is 20th. So, he's had mobile quarterbacks. You see Colin Kaepernick with San Francisco, Tyrod Taylor with Buffalo, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. But even last year, now they didn't have great running backs last year, but even last year with Justin Herbert, you get 23, they're ranked 23rd in running back points, and they're ranked 31st in running back target share. I mean, it's a fairly consistent trend that is a little bit alarming for Greg Roman. So, I'm actually lower than the market on Amari and Hampton right now. A couple
slightly, not too much though, right?
Yeah, it's really weird. There aren't many players where it's super dramatic from ADP. ADP is just sharper. I mean, it gets sharper every year. And so, even some of the players to avoid, it's like, they're not like hard fades for me, they're not like, they're just guys that I'm like 3 or 4 spots, like Terry McLaurin. Like, I don't think he's going to burn you. I just think that he's a little bit overvalued where he goes in drafts.
So, are you telling me that you don't love Najee Harris this year?
Najee Harris is actually a fade. Yeah. Najee Harris is a fade. And then you look at Sean McVay, who we'll get to this more in a second with Kyron Williams, but look at the last 6 years. You have the x-axis, you have average running back target share, and then the y-axis is total targets at running back, right? So this is per season since 2019. Look at where the Rams are. The Rams are in the bottom left, like in another like stratosphere compared to everyone else in the NFL. You get New Orleans in the top right, which isn't that big of a surprise. You get New England up there, which isn't that big of a surprise either. But you get the Rams in the bottom left because they have ranked 30th or 31st or 32nd in running back target share in each of the last 6 seasons. And they've been dead last, I think, in each of the last 2. So we'll get to that in a second with Kyron Williams. But I think it's an interesting chart to look at. And this was created by AI.
There you go.
Yeah, which is fun. I was able to I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let ChatGPT create this for me. It's going to be a lot easier.
Here's the data. Just show me what it's like.
Yeah, and then I'm like, hey, can you make the the labels a little bit bigger? And I made it a little bit bigger. It was nice.
Did you use the prompt that I told you to use? You didn't.
No, of course not.
No, you did.
Of course not.
Prompt it first and then prompt it. Say, what would you do to make an amazing chart? It's going to tell you. Then you take that and you upload the table.
I should have asked for another infographic.
That's right.
like we had last week.
All right. Let's get on to, because we're going to have a lot of these guys.
We got a lot of these guys.
Toughest players to rank. You got Christian McCaffrey first.
I do. I have Christian McCaffrey listed here first. Yeah. Are you going to black these guys out?
I'll black these guys out. So we can't see them.
So yeah, Christian McCaffrey, I have first here. I think it's pretty obvious though. He has more upside than anyone else in fantasy football. Last time we saw a full season, he had over 25 PPR points per game. The biggest question, or the question for him, is how healthy is he going to be? If he's healthy, and the way I play fantasy football, I'm fine with taking a chance on Christian McCaffrey, especially if he's going to have, some home leagues, he's going to go well into the second round, I think, because people are just going to be afraid of the health stuff. We know in best ball and, some ADP sites, he's like more of a late first round pick, but obviously if he were fully healthy, he'd be probably the 101 in fantasy. So, I'm willing to take on that risk at the end of the first round. But I understand if people wouldn't be. I've mentioned many times before that San Francisco is one of the top teams to improve in their touchdowns per game year over year. I love that offense and targeting that offense this year. And so obviously Christian McCaffrey would benefit from that. There's no Deebo Samuel, which should improve the target shares for guys like Kittle, the wideouts there, but obviously CMC as well. So there's the 20% target share potential for CMC and an improved offense from last year. Like, he should have a good season if he's healthy. But it's just difficult because we don't know where that health really stands.
I think we have to operate like it's like he's going to be healthy if you're drafting him in that first round.
If you have to assume that, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's get to Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, so this chart is one that we kind of talked about, I think, last week, about looking at top 18 running backs and looking at their previous season receiving points per game as a sort of like proxy to predict current season success. There's some poor hit rates when you're in that 0 to 3 bucket, which is where Jonathan Taylor's in. And this data, I removed Derrick Henry from the data because Derrick Henry skews some of the data. So you can see what this shows.
He does.
Yeah, like a lot. What this shows, though, is how well these players outperformed expectation by 2, 4, and 6 points per game. Okay, so you have some player that goes 27th overall, and he's still in the top 18 at running back. At 27th overall, that running back is expected to score some sort of points per game based on his ADP. That's based on history. Okay, if they exceed that by 2 points, by 4 points, by 6 points, they'll be thrown in these buckets, right? And these buckets are based off of how many receiving points per game they had in their previous season with a minimum 8 games played in that previous season. Jonathan Taylor last year was well under that 3 mark. And you can see here that players who are under that 3 mark that aren't named Derrick Henry have not, there's been 13 of them since 2014. They've been not able to exceed ADP expectation by 2 or more, 4 or more, or 6 or more points per game at all. And you can see how that differs from players who have different receiving profiles. And obviously the guys who have 7+ are the ones that we want to target most. That scares me. That scares me quite a bit. Now, I will say, if there's any running back who in this generation profiles like Derrick Henry, it's Jonathan Taylor. Like, Jonathan Taylor can get away with not having some robust, 10, 12, 13% target share and still be a relevant fantasy asset. We saw that even at times last year. But last year, if you look at his splits with and without Anthony Richardson, he was much, much better without Anthony Richardson. Fortunately, things are trending in the Daniel Jones direction right now. And so that's why I don't think he's like an obvious fade, but it is a trend that we should be aware of. And it makes him, a more volatile piece to rank.
All right. Agreed there. And like when we're talking about best ball, like we've seen his spike weeks too. Like
yeah, I think best ball is a little bit different because he's a big play waiting to happen in best ball.
Yeah, but he's still going like late second round.
Yeah, Ben says Jones was great for Saquon. As we know. Yeah, I mean it's scary. It's scary.
All right, this is a guy that we've talked a little bit about recently. Chase Brown. You were off on him last year, then you came on him hard.
I came on him when it mattered. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, thankfully. Yeah. He was one of my highest roster players last year. And so, yeah, I mean, like now we're in a situation where, he has pretty good draft capital, and, an ADP is pretty high. And you have to ask the question, in these situations, I think you could even put Carolina in this same bucket, right? Where you look at their previous season, or even LA, the Rams, you look at their previous season and you see that a running back, especially like during the second half of the year, what have you, had an obscene backfield share, right? Chase Brown's backfield share last year down the stretch, top 5 easily in the league. Like he was being used like Bijan Robinson plus. Like it was crazy. And so you have to ask yourself, is that intentional, or is that something that the team wants to adjust and change? And it was just done out of necessity. And if you look at Carolina, I think Carolina's was out of necessity to some degree. Who was behind Chuba Hubbard last year, right? There was not significant competition with Chuba. And then Jonathan Brooks came. He actually started seeing a little bit of work, and then he got hurt. And then Chuba started seeing these massive backfield shares again. Kyron Williams, crazy backfield share, 85% of the team's running back rushes. There's some fragility there. We'll talk about that in a second. Chase Brown, okay, you look at the backups there, and you're like, oh, it's just Taj Brooks and Samaje Perine. And Samaje Perine was a thorn in Joe Mixon's side for a while, a couple years ago, seeing a lot of the receiving work and capping that true ceiling for Mixon. So, not only that, but Chase Brown, given his day 3 draft status, the model liked him versus draft capital, but he still had a poor overall ZAP score because of where he was drafted, right? And usually out of the early rounds, running backs with poorer ZAP scores have not fared as well. So that's a trend that is not favorable for Brown, but he had really good receiving numbers last year. So that's favorable for Chase Brown. That's why I'm kind of getting like pulled in every direction with Brown. I'm mostly at market with him. I'm not really being, aggressive or fading or anything like that, but that's why he's listed here today, because I think he's a very, very difficult player to rank.
Yeah. You also have Zach Moss reworked his deal. Ben Keller said is Moss roasted. He reworked his deal to take a lot less money this season.
I'm worried. Yeah, I'm worried. I think they keep Brown, Brooks, and Perine.
Yeah. So could be a thorn in the side, especially when you're talking about touchdowns. All right. Let's go to Kyren Williams, poster boy.
Look, I faded Kyren last year, or at least had him on the avoids list, and he outperformed ADP expectation by 1.7 points. Now, fortunately, and I said this on Perspectives, it's going to drop later this week. I had Derrick Henry ahead of him, so that was against ADP, so it wasn't that detrimental, but it was still a bad call at the end of the day. And so I'm doing it again though this year. I think I'm more on the fade side with Kyren than the target side. And I know it's like, oh, this is just the popular analyst thing to do, and analysts are so stupid because all the Rams do is just give Kyren Williams the ball, and we're just ignoring that Kyren Williams and Sean Payton have this relationship. I'm not ignoring all of that. I know that this could go south. I know that Kyren Williams could just see the same workload that he saw last year, but we usually don't see players sustain that kind of running back rush share. That 85% share that he had last year is actually greater than what he had the previous season when he broke out. And then last season, he saw dips in pretty much every single efficiency metric as a runner. And what, like you just saw, they rarely deploy their running backs as pass catchers. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Kyren Williams, if Jarquez Hunter steals 10% of the team's running back rushes, 10%, that's it. If he steals 10% of the team's running back rushes and Blake Corum steals another 10% year over year, then all of a sudden, if Kyren Williams is in like that 65 to 70% running back rush share range, his value is zapped because there's no receiving work going to that backfield, right? It's going to be very difficult for him to maintain fantasy status. He's a really, really fragile asset, which makes it really, really hard to rank him because his projection looks okay, but I think there's a lot more of that fragility to that projection.
Last year, we saw obviously these running backs not get hurt at the rate that they have been previously. Yeah. But it seems like we're getting more options at running back this year. And so if it does revert back to kind of the injury rate that they've seen, then you're going to, I don't know, it's tough. Like you said, like I just want to run it back as far as fading a lot of these running backs.
I think it's a smart thing to do this year. Don't feel good about.
Yeah.
Our RB2s last year were the best that they've ever been in like fantasy football history. And it's because they didn't get hurt. And it's because, they played well, sure, but they just, there were no injuries. And when there's not injuries, then all of those running backs are able to maintain their rank as opposed to them being pushed down a little bit. And then those overall, the RB13 scores this many points per game historically. Last year, it just was better because there was a better player in that role and in that spot, right? If every running back got hurt except for one, then all of those spots would look worse than what they do historically because the backup running backs are more than likely going to see 80% of what those RB2s would be seeing.
All right. The other poster boy is Tyreek Hill. This is a tough one also.
So tough. I don't know. The reason this is tough for me is because I think rational coaching says that the Dolphins revert back to their 2023 ways, right? Which is Tua not having the super low ADOT, them throwing it deep more and using the wide receivers more than they did, and Jonnu Smith probably being the one player who gets hurt most from that environment, right? And that's why I think Jonnu is kind of a fade right now. At his ADP, he's like tight end 9 from a season long perspective. I have him closer to like tight end 12. Because look, I'm factoring in what if they don't, what if they don't go back to that, then Jonnu's going to be fine. I think Devon Achane will be involved no matter what, because he's so electric and good as a receiver out of the backfield. But we have Tyreek Hill is at that point in his career from an age perspective where things start to drop off. And last year, things dropped off. 21.5% target share per game rate. That was his lowest since 2019. 1.75 yards per out run rate, worst of his career. What if this is just the start of the downturn? The thing that's keeping me going is the rational coaching thing that I said. I think that they have to revert back. But also, if Jalen Waddle thrived last year, I would feel worse about Tyreek Hill, I think, because that would tell us that the environment wasn't putrid. But he was still better than Jalen Waddle, in yards per out run and targets per out run, all that stuff. And so I don't think that this means that Tyreek is completely dust. But again, because there is that fear of the offensive line's not that strong, Tua and the concussion issues, I think that's why he was getting the ball out so quickly and having that lower ADOT. That could continue. And if that continues this year, then Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are not going to live up to expectation again. We have to factor that in, which is why I'm just kind of I'm like, all right, I'll get some Tyreek. I won't be overweight. I'll try not to be underweight, and we'll just kind of let this thing go.
Offensive line was terrible. Quarterback play was terrible. He also was injured. We found out kind of later that is worse than we thought. But we know his upside. Like last year, he was going top 3.
Right.
Preseason. He had that little incident. Was it week 1 or week 2?
That's might have been pre week 1, I think.
And then went off. And after that, it was all downhill from there. So that's the thing for me is gauging where his upside is compared to is he going down. Like we've seen these wires like Julio Jones, a couple years ago.
We see it a lot. Yeah.
Des Bryant down so fast.
Yeah. Des Bryant hit a wall. Fast. Yeah. I mean, it happens, especially when, I am more concerned about the bigger bodied wide receivers who never have separated.
Right.
Like very rarely do you get an Anquan Bolden situation where he's just really good forever. It's usually like Kenny Golladay or Des Bryant where they're physical and then they're no longer able to be physical. For Golladay, it happened a lot earlier, but Des Bryant, it just hit, right? And he's not able to be physical anymore. And all of a sudden he's not a very good wide receiver, and usable wide receiver. At least with Tyreek Hill, there's a different kind of skill set. And you have to worry about speed, obviously, but I don't think his speed has really gone away.
All right. Dylan mentioned that only 14 likes. So yes, we need more likes. If you're watching,
please
like this.
And we know there's more there. Yeah. Like you said, 81 people are watching. If you're watching, hit the like button.
I'm begging you.
Please.
What
do I need to do to get a like? Do I need to show my sophomore year yearbook picture again?
Just a man sitting in front of everybody telling
it's like a bad episode of Black Mirror.
Please clap. Please. Okay. Please. All right. The Jags offense.
The whole offense. The whole offense.
I actually, and this is not even on here, but I messaged you about Dyami Brown, and I heard Tyler bring him up on today's show too. Like there's just so many different options here.
I need to put Dyami Brown in the rankings because I only rank to a certain number and it gets cut off and stuff when transferring to like DK stuff and whatnot. But like Dyami Brown though is much more of a best ball player than a season long player. Right. So like it's kind of a weird, just given the way that I do rankings and stuff, but yeah, it's an offense that we all want to invest in. You get Liam Cohen there after what he did in Tampa Bay. And that's a pretty good. That's probably like a 84% Liam Cohen right there.
Okay.
But like you get Cohen, who we're hoping is able to bring that magic to Jacksonville. Travis Hunter, though, how much is he going to be playing on offense? You get Gladstone this past week or yesterday, I guess it was, talking about how Travis Hunter, started out on offense during camp and everyone was so excited because he's going to play wide receiver or like full-time wide receiver. But that was more so to like understand the language and like get things down, which makes sense. And then he
Yeah.
moved over to defense. So we still don't know how much Travis Hunter is going to play on offense. And then you look at the backfield, I've done the research on ambiguous backfields this year. This is the most, other than maybe Pittsburgh, this is the most ambiguous backfield of all of them. And I say, and it's the most attractive one because I think the Jags offense will be better than Pittsburgh's offense, and these guys are cheaper. So if one guy emerges from this backfield, then that guy's going to be a league-winning player at the end of the day, hypothetically. So you're sitting here and it's like I don't think it's Tank Bigsby because he lacks the receiving upside. He had a really poor previous season yards per route run. His yards per route run, Kitchen, on he has I wrote it actually today because I was writing some of the dart throw stuff for the draft guide, but I don't have it in front of me. He's got like a 0.4 yards per route run across his career so far in the NFL. So like that's just for context, like anything under 0.7 is the threshold I've been using for like watch out for their target share next year. He's at like 0.4. It's horrible. And so I'm not really concerned about Bigsby stealing some of that receiving work. And if that's the case, he's probably not going to be the running back that I target from this backfield. But I think you should be throwing darts at both ETN and Tootin just to say, all right, maybe one of these guys becomes the primary receiver. I like Tootin more than ETN in terms of value, but I'm fine with throwing darts at both of them. But yeah, it's just there's a lot up in the air in Jacksonville right now, and the answer, it might just be to draft Trevor Lawrence at the end of the day. Like I think Trevor Lawrence is a very, very, very good value at quarterback.
So it's not apples to apples, but I remember last year being in a lot of drafts thinking I want either Zach Moss or Chase Brown because I think that the Bengals offense is going to be much better than what it was. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity there for these two guys. And it seems like that's how I'm viewing the Jags offense. Like I want to leave a draft with one of these guys.
Yeah, I think that you should. I mean, even last year we had 3 obvious ambiguous backfields, and 2 of the 3 backfields ended up having a guy emerge. You had Tennessee also, right, with Spears and Pollard ended up emerging. And then Pittsburgh didn't with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. It was just kind of, Harris maybe kind of, but he wasn't even close to someone that you were confidently playing throughout the season, and especially during the second half of the season. And so I definitely think that this is a backfield that you should be heavily investing in. These are where league winners come from, these backfields.
My concern is that Bigsby's going to come in and just vulture all the touchdowns.
That's the fear with Bigsby. I like he would be more of a detriment than an actual value himself. Yeah. Detriment to others. That is
Xavier Worthy. You talk about a guy who is polarizing.
Yeah.
It's Xavier Worthy.
I said this on the show at one point this offseason where I said, I think Worthy come August is going to be one of the most polarizing players in fantasy football. And we're already seeing it kind of. If you look at Twitter, people are talking about him. People talking about he's going to play the Tyreek Hill role and he was so good at the end of the year. This is when it's polarizing is if you look at like DK and where he goes there. Where is he, like wide receiver 28-ish or so? Like 20, 26, something like that. But then you look at ADP and season long, wide receiver 22, right? Which is a pretty significant difference from an ADP perspective, especially when best ball would favor, in my opinion,
someone like Saber. Right. Yeah.
And so just given that, and we're seeing like ADP and cost be all over the place for someone like him, that tells me that there's valuations all over the place. If you're in a room where his ADP is wide receiver 22, I think in that scenario, he's a fade pretty easily, in my opinion, because if you look at, and I talked about this in the mailbag show last week, look at Kansas City and ask yourself, what did they do this offseason to tell you that they're going to get vertical again? Because if you look at the last 2 years, Matt Nagy's been offensive coordinator too. If you look at their last 2 years, Patrick Mahomes has had his lowest ADOTs of his career. They're not throwing it deep nearly as much because they're taking what the defenses are giving them, right? And they're not allowing them to beat them vertically. Okay. Xavier Worthy, they draft last year, and everyone's like, including myself, I'm like, oh, maybe they're going to finally get vertical with it. And then they didn't. Patrick Mahomes' ADOT was the exact same, year over year. It was still very, very low. And you look at what Worthy did during the second half of the season and in the playoffs, and he was better. You look at weeks 1 to 10, you can see right here, he had a 0.89 yards per out run rate. That is putrid. That's horrible. He had an ADOT though during that time of about 12 yards, and he saw a target of 20 plus air yards on 25% of his targets. And so you look at what happened after week 10, his ADOT fell. He wasn't seeing deep passes. He was seeing a lot of wide receiver screens. And what happens in that environment, he's able to compile a lot more statistics and numbers for fantasy purposes. My problem is that Rashee Rice is going to be back, right? Rice wasn't there throughout most of last season, but definitely not after week 10. And Rice is that lower ADOT, middle of the field, go-to slot target for Patrick Mahomes, and he's good at it. That is the one thing that Rashee Rice is elite at, right? And so this is why I think Travis Kelce is massively overvalued at tight end 6. I think Xavier Worthy at wide receiver 22 is really overvalued. You know, I see him more closer to like 28 to 30. And, you know, he'll have spiked weeks, all that stuff, whatever. But Rashee Rice, to me, is the player that you should be targeting out of Kansas City because likely not going to be suspended, already healthy. We saw him with an elite ceiling to start last year. And again, nothing happened with Kansas City this offseason to suggest that they're going to be a vertical offense all of a sudden. We can't just like I'm trying not to just.
We need their defense to be terrible. Like we need them to be
sure
in like come from behind mode.
Sure.
But
I'm
it
just
doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to just create narratives for the sake of like having something fun, you know, like sure, we want Xavier Worthy to be a thing, but if we're being objective, what changed? And you can ask that same question with Miami that I talked about earlier, but I think what has to change with Miami is that their coaches are going to be fired if they don't change what they did last year offensively. Whereas in Kansas City, they're going to get better. Kansas City's offense is going to be better year over year. There's almost no, like their yards per play last year was the worst of Andy Reid's tenure in Kansas City. So they're going to be better offensively, especially with Rashee Rice back. But that doesn't mean that Xavier Worthy is going to smash and that they're all of a sudden going to get a lot of these like deep ball looks and stuff.
You haven't said one name. And if you go to LA and you look up in the mountains, you'll see a big sign.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that sign says?
Yeah, it says Hollywood Brown.
Hollywood. That's what it says.
Had to change his name in all my spreadsheets back to just Hollywood because I had Marquise and it was really
man,
because all these
he might be one of my most drafted players.
Really?
I know.
Really? Well, that's the other thing too is that we didn't have
banking
Hollywood.
on him being healthy. Like
yeah, sure. But we didn't have Hollywood last year either. Like that's why I'm afraid of Xavier Worthy. Like I think Worthy's better than Hollywood. I'm just saying like another body, another piece. Like you know,
that lowers with a similar skill set. Right.
Yeah, and it lowers a player's target share. And that's a little bit scary. Like I think that Worthy has a chance to be a better real football player than a fantasy football player, similar to like what Deshaun Jackson was, right? Like Deshaun Jackson was never that great in fantasy.
He had his weeks.
Yeah, but he wasn't someone that you were like I would be very surprised if Xavier Worthy finishes this season as like a top 15 wide receiver. It's too competitive of a wide receiver landscape.
That's the other thing is that there's some of these randos. Like
so why are we? Why elevate Xavier Worthy? That's my thing.
I get it. This is why he's tough to rank, JJ.
It is.
I feel like you're like justifying, like kind of fading him at some points. But
well, really I think Worthy at wide receiver 22.
Yeah,
Xavier Worthy is a fade. Yeah,
but this episode is like toughest players to rank, and we just went through an exercise where you just proved why it's tough to rank him.
Exactly.
So, all right, let's get to the next one. DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, really, really tough to rank Swift because he's in a good backfield in terms of the potential fantasy points. You know, Chicago improved their offensive line. They get Ben Johnson. They improved their pass catchers. He's the clear pass catcher in the backfield, which is, you know, check that box, which is really important. Last time that he was with Ben Johnson, there's a narrative that like Ben Johnson hates DeAndre Swift, but we have no idea what that relationship is. Like the Lions, the last time we saw DeAndre Swift was with Ben Johnson was right before he had a season with Jamal Williams, and then they go out and they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. And so, you know, is it because of DeAndre Swift not giving them enough? And Ben Johnson was at the forefront saying, let's get Jahmyr Gibbs because I hate DeAndre Swift.
That was kind of the narrative that people thought that's why they would draft another running back this year. It's because he hated DeAndre Swift.
Exactly. But clearly, I don't think that's the case. And so the last time we saw DeAndre Swift with Ben Johnson, running back rush share per game was not that strong. It was only 28%. Jamal Williams is getting some work, and they weren't using Swift that much on the ground, but he had a 12.5% target share, 13.7 PPR points per game. He was the RB16 in points per game that year. And to me, this is a situation where we've now seen a little bit more of Swift on the ground since then, like in that role. Like, remember what he did in Philly a couple years ago? And even last year, he was carrying the ball a decent amount. So like, I could see DeAndre Swift having a pretty good season, just because that receiving backbone's there. And then obviously, I like Roshan and such. We already talked about all that, but he's hard to rank because it's DeAndre Swift. And, we know that he hasn't been like a huge bell cow throughout his career.
Okay. Next one, I had to kind of mess with that because I didn't want to mess with the colors.
Yeah.
It's Isaiah Pacheco. It was curious seeing him on here. Are you saying it's tough to rank him because maybe you're higher on him than other people are?
I think so. Yeah. I think it's tough.
You don't want to be
kind of higher. I think it's tough to rank him because hypothetically, before his injury last year, he was pacing to have a really good year. Look at these peripherals last year. And it's only 2 weeks, but 80.7% running back rush share, 17.1% target share per game to start the season last year. 2 really solid outings from a points scored perspective. Like that is the upside with Pacheco, is that you could get I do think that he has, low end RB1, high end RB2 upside if they deploy him in a really favorable way. And you look at the backfield and you say to yourself, who's going to get in his way? Like Kareem Hunt looked like a dad last year. Elijah Mitchell's there now, who, is a good change of pace kind of guy. I think Brashard Smith is a good dart throw at this point because they're actually using him with the first team. And he was a really fun prospect, a good receiving back, who has experience playing wide receiver. So I think Brashard Smith could get in the way of and capping the target share upside for Pacheco. But where he gets drafted, it's kind of attractive. But there is the downside of like, look at what he did during the second half of last year. And that's the scary part with Pacheco because he was completely unusable. Yeah.
That's the issue as far as like, there's so many different options there.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day, Kareem. Yes.
All right. The next one, moving on. I feel like we've talked a lot about the Kansas City offense today.
We have, yeah.
Josh Downs. He's been mentioned in chat a few times.
Yeah, everyone loves Josh Downs because Josh Downs is really good at football. Like I loved, if you guys go back and read the prospect guide when he came out, the Zap model loved Josh Downs. I loved Josh Downs. The problem is it's the Jaden Reed problem, where he's not out on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. The difference is that Jaden Reed plays in an offense that's pretty conducive for efficiency, whereas you get Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, and that's scary, right? But Josh Downs' peripherals are unreal. Like his his first downs per route run, his yards per route run, all that stuff looks great. So like everything, and not only that, there's some trends with late round wide receivers that you can read about in this year's draft guide that also favor Downs. Like there's a lot that points to Downs being a very good and usable wide receiver, but it's so hard to ignore the situation there in Indy. And I know that Jake is saying Josh Downs in the Wan'Dale Robinson role. The problem though is that here the difference is that Wan'Dale Robinson was the clear number 2 target on that team, right? It was Darius Slayton, and then Malik Neighbors was getting a lot of love. Yeah, who else are they going to throw?
There was Hyatt. I feel like there was a bunch of
Jalen Hyatt. What is Jalen Hyatt? That's some Tennessee bias over here with the Jalen Hyatt.
Listen, I'm a Vandy fan, so slow down. I'm just saying, last year it seemed like preseason there were like 4 different Giants options.
Yeah, look, but here's the other thing. Okay, if we get Josh Downs in the Wan'Dale Robinson role, I don't think, and people are going to probably disagree with this, I don't think that's necessarily like a great thing, because Wan'Dale Robinson is actually not a bad after the catch kind of player. And Downs, what is Downs going to see? A higher target share and more work, because that would be the way that you improve on that high floor role, which is what that is a high floor role, right? It's not a ceiling role at all. I think people are saying Josh Downs is really good, Therefore, he would see a higher ceiling than Wan'Dale Robinson. But the Wan'Dale Robinson role is this like really low A-dot role where you got to do a lot after the catch. Josh Downs is a technician as a route runner. Like he's a much better wide receiver itself than Wan'Dale Robinson. So I don't think we want that role for Josh Downs.
Yeah.
We just want a normal slot role for him where they can pepper him with targets that way, down the field more.
Andrew Cooper was saying yesterday on X, he mentioned people are all about Downs, and like he could have potential if he like steps into that role. But last year you saw Michael Pittman with the back injury. You saw Alec Pierce go down, and Downs did not his like snaps. He didn't pick up any extra snaps. AD Mitchell did.
He's a slot guy. Guy. That's the problem. They need to change the offense to get him more involved, and they might, and they should, but we don't know if that's going to happen. And you have AD Mitchell. They drafted Tyler Warren is another thing that we have to worry about, like in terms of target share pie. Like it's very difficult. That's why the Wan'Dale Robinson role thing, it just doesn't do it for me because I don't think that's the way that Josh Downs is going to be able to score a lot of fantasy points. I think that we need him to just be able to play on all downs, no pun intended, and be able to be a reliable option as like Wan'Dale Robinson was not playing a normal wide receiver position. Like it's just not what he does. And so we want that with Josh Downs to score fantasy points and have an actual ceiling.
Did Jake know that the Wan'Dale Robinson comp was going to get you going? Because I didn't know it.
I didn't know it either until I thought about it. I mean, I just thought about that on the fly. Like I'm just reacting to what was said. And I'm thinking to myself, like, no, we weren't like confidently playing Wan'Dale Robinson last year. Like we didn't like having Wanda. He was on my sleeper show almost every week because I knew he would get me like 10 PPR points, but he would never get me 14, you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
Jake said it was mainly a joke. Well, thanks, Jake. Now we have I guess unearthed a trigger for JJ. He didn't know it was there. All right.
Yeah.
Quinshon Judkins. Will you talk about this? I mentioned a couple shows ago, this whole Browns offense is tough for me.
Yeah, I think that they're mostly fades, to be honest with you. Like I'm not even that into Jerry Jeudy. I think Jeudy has a lot of more downside than people are giving him credit for because they're using the splits with Jameis Winston and they're just assuming that Joe Flacco can just do that, number one. But then number two, when you look at Jeudy when Cedric Tillman was active last year, his numbers were not nearly as good. And so I'm a little bit worried about Jeudy. And we have like years of data with Jerry Jeudy not being that great. So I don't think fading Jeudy is gonna come back to haunt me. And I'm not like, best ball, I'm not totally fading, but I think in season long, I'd rather go with some of the other guys in his range. But Quinshon Judkins is difficult because he should see a lot of work on the ground. I just don't know if year one is going to see a lot of work through the air, and they could be in a lot of negative game scripts. Jerome Ford is still there. I think when Ford is gone, if he is gone next year, that's going to help Judkins out quite a bit, especially as he, learns the NFL a little bit better. He's fine, but he's just tough to rank because it's a bad offense and he might not be that much of a pass catcher.
Okay. Chris Godwin. Is this a health related? Are these both health related things? Right?
Yes, they're just honorable mentions. I'm just throwing them out there because of the health. We have no idea, when they're going to be ready, what things look like there. Yeah. Obviously Godwin had crazy upside last year, but who knows if he's going to be ready week one. So that's why they're just kind of honorable mentions as tough players to rank.
Yeah, the Ayuk one especially.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw one on here, and it's going to shock you. Cam Ward.
Oh, there we go.
Why do you hate Cam Ward?
Why do I need to draft Cam Ward?
Because he's the number one overall pick.
Yeah, rookie quarterbacks or whatever in fantasy typically.
What? What if you
unless
said
you're
Jaden
Daniels? Unless you're
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Now that I have the draft guide, I got receipts, and I can say Jaden Daniels was a target for me in the draft guide last year, so it's fine. I will go after rookie quarterbacks sometimes. I just don't. I don't see that there. That area of the draft for quarterbacks is rich. Like there's a lot of good. Like I would. You got Geno Smith there, who I think is a little bit undervalued, but then you get JJ McCarthy, who is very undervalued, and you move up a little bit more than that, you get to Trevor Lawrence, and it's just like in a managed season long league, home league, you're gonna be able to get Trevor Lawrence in like the last round. So why get Cam Ward? He'll be a streamer and maybe he pops, but I can react to that after it starts happening.
Yeah. This is another guy. We talked about Jackson Dart. There's another guy. Of course, in my home league, he's not going to be. His price is going to go up because just a bunch of Titans homers. But there is a lot of like steam coming out of camp for him.
I think he's good.
Well, I think you're like 15 spots behind ADP on DK.
This is okay, but that's different. That's different because the way that I look at best ball and the way that the rankings work for best ball is that you should not be really looking at ranking when you're in the 14th round plus, right? Because you're taking Cam Ward if you have Calvin Ridley. You're taking Cam Ward if you want to have a backdoor stack of some sort that you haven't gotten earlier on. In a regular redraft league, right? From a rankings perspective, you do not need to take Cam Ward. In 98% of, if not more, of one quarterback season-long leagues, there's just no need.
He does not have top 12 upside this year.
At least right away.
Right.
At least right away. Like, and if he does, then you can be reactive and more reactive to that than your league mates might be. But you have to remember, at quarterback, everyone's going to feel good about quarterback after the draft. Everyone will. And then players then they realize, oh man, I drafted Jared Goff as the QB7. I'm such a moron. And then they have to adjust, and then they'd start to add
Grandma Goff
and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Cam Ward, not hard to, I guess any late round QB, because of just your brand and your research, is just not hard to rank for you. Because you can always screen them during the season.
Yes, I think quarterback is the position that we've solved most and best in fantasy football. Like we have solved quarterback. It's an efficient market. We now know that rushing quarterbacks matter most. We also know that passing volume or passing numbers fluctuate and efficiency fluctuates. So we can fade the guys that are getting lifted by their previous season passing touchdown rates and passing numbers. And we can target the guys who maybe were unfortunate in that department, right? And then we can find guys who have a little bit of rushing mobility and target them. And like, it's a fairly straightforward position, in my opinion.
Yeah. Superflex, though, brings a little bit more.
Yeah. Cam Ward, you can get in Superflex fine. He'd be a great QB3 if you go like later, like you get like Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence, then you get Cam Ward as QB3.
That feels like a backhanded.
No way. He's a great QB3. Great.
He could be a QB2 this season, JJ.
That's why he's a great QB3, because you're getting him at a value, and then he'd end up being a QB2.
There you go. All right, you redeemed yourself. I feel like we went through a lot of players, and we probably could do a few more, but to see like the like someone, an analyst like you that has to rank someone, it's easy for me. Because I'm just like, what about this guy? What about that guy?
Sure.
I like this guy more. But you actually have to put together these rankings.
Right.
And anytime you're having to put together rankings, sometimes it can be difficult because there's so many different factors. There's health. There's like the market is a big factor as well.
Yeah. That's why people are like, hey, why did your rankings change in May when nothing's happened? And it's because you start to research stuff more and you realize that you were just you didn't have the right foundation and take with some players early on. Yeah. And then also you have to play the market. Like the market, in my opinion, playing the market is just as much about just getting good exposure as it is the market is not wrong all the time. Yeah. You know? And so if I'm egregiously different than the market on a player, I'm going to ask why. And then when I ask why, I probably will find out that I had some gap in my analysis. But there's some players like I think Austin Eckler is wildly underpriced, right? So like I can just kind of go with that. And it's a lot easier when it's a late round player than an early round player. When you're taking a stand on that kind of guy.
I've also seen the back end side of things where you've got sites that grade people that give rankings like best draft or best draft ranking, whatever. That is like gamified. People, I'm not sure people know that, and that's a whole nother episode. But
I could rant about that for days. I hate the Fantasy Pros accuracy rankings and contest. I don't care. What am I? I like the people at Fantasy Pros. I just hate the contest. I think the contest, because people latch onto that contest and think that there's and look, the people who do it, they're skillful at that contest, right? Like they're good.
There is
at
game
that
theory to those rankings.
Yes, they're doing a good job at doing that, but it's not usable. It's not actually like I am trying to help people win fantasy leagues, and an accuracy contest is not helping people win fantasy leagues. That's what pisses me off about them.
Okay, Wandale Robinson on Josh Downs and Fantasy Pros found 2 of JJ's triggers on the show. One of the reasons why I love doing this show, JJ, with you is not just because you're amazing or that you're my boss, but it's because I learned something when I do this show with you.
About me or about just fantasy football?
Everything.
Oh, okay.
Learn something about you. I learned something about fantasy football. When I put together the guides, guess what? I learned something about fantasy football.
That's good.
It's one of the beauties of this show. So I want to thank you just for teaching us. For more content, though, we're putting out more content than ever. So need people to do us a favor and subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this video, leave a comment afterwards. Any sort of feedback that you have, any sort of questions that you have, let us know. That feedback helps us, and the feedback also helps the YouTube algorithm as we look forward to doing more of these shows. We have the newsletter coming out on Friday. We got the late round draft guide releasing July 1st. We got the DraftKings Draft One, Get One. If you're not in the Patreon, that would be my plug. Get in the Patreon right now because there's so many active channels. This is when it gets fun. Not just JJ's high school picture, but if you're into best ball or you just want to learn more about best ball, hang out in the best ball chat the whole day, and you'll learn something. So that's fun. JJ, you have anything else to say before we sign off?
No, if you're in the best ball channel, you'll see a lot of Drake May teams. That's for sure.
Gosh, I've been seeing some of these highlights of Drake May.
It's hard
just
to not
resurfacing. Oh boy, I think Enhart has put out a few highlights of him running the ball, and it's just.
Yeah, it's magic.
Oh boy.
Very obvious pick right now. At QB 16, come on.
That guy's got QB 12 upside.
That's right.
All right. On behalf of JJ, I'm David, and we again just really appreciate all of you. And I guess I could just end it by saying, hey, thanks for tuning in.